Welcome to the Blessors of Israel podcast. I'm Matthew Dodd, Executive Director of Blessors of Israel. Honored to be in studio today with Pastor Rich Jones. He's the founder and the chairman of Blessors of Israel. Pastor Rich, the news cycle today began with news in regards to Netanyahu stating that they had discovered in a myriad of tunnels Russian, high-tech Russian munitions there. And in any other news cycle, that probably would have been one of the headliners, especially for us at Blessors of Israel, because we continually focus on how the stage is being set for the Battle of Gog and Magog, according to Ezekiel 38 and 39, where Russia will lead a coalition of nations, including Iran, Persia, Turkey, and other nations as well, so that Israel will be literally boxed in north, east, and south, outnumbered, outgunned, and yet God will divinely intervene. So any other day, we would focus on that.
Right.
But today's we're hit with
bigger news.
The news that the head of Hamas, Yahya Sinwar, in an exchange, in a battle with IDF forces
soldiers,
in Rafah, was executed, was eliminated. And that throws
not executed. That's not the right
not
word.
executed, but eliminated.
Died in battle.
Died in battle, and as a result, that changes the dynamic dramatically in regards to Israel and its war against Hamas.
It is perhaps the most monumental event since this thing began, October 7th. It's that big. It's that monumental. We cannot miss the significance of this. Really, we have to see it as a victory for Israel. And this has been their stated goal from the beginning. We're going to topple Hamas. And the United States has said repeatedly that the main barrier to peace is Yahya Sinwar. He is the one that has been holding out, being the difficult one. And so now, with this event unfolding today, what could it mean? I mean, I think this is really on the minds of leaders all across the world today. What might this mean? Of course, our prayer is that it means that somehow, some way, that this is going to bring an end to this conflict. That maybe someone with more reasonable mindset could come and bring some settlement. Now, we understand, of course, that Israel has the body. And I think negotiation wise, I think that perhaps could be utilized to exchange for hostages.
I agree. The body has been shipped to Tel Aviv for further examination, but it has been already posited that in exchange for the hostages, the body of Sinwar would be returned to Gaza for proper burial.
This is huge. What's happening today is absolutely
They're likening it
massive.
to 9/11, and the death of Osama bin Laden.
Right.
That's how
significant this
event is.
It really, really is.
And we need to remember who Sinwar was. This is the man when there were all these Palestinian deaths who said they were necessary sacrifices. Right. So that's how we viewed this. And in many ways, we had many podcasts where we were talking about how Sinwar, this mastermind, and the events of October 7th, 1,200 people murdered. You're talking about babies who were beheaded. You have women and young girls who were brutally raped.
Exactly.
Men beheaded. And then 250 people taken hostage. And then he was using them as human shields.
That's right.
And then somehow was able to, those human shields, many of them died. And so then he was on his own with two others. By the way, one of the members who was with him, who was also killed in the exchange, looks like he worked for the United Nations.
Really?
Yes, UNRWA.
I actually didn't know
That's been in the news, and so there's a lot of concern about that because UNRWA is getting defended by many different nations, and all of a sudden here with Sinwar was one. Not only one of his bodyguards, but also a member of UNRWA Israel.
And in the Hamas forces.
Yes.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
Fighting with weapons against the IDF.
Had about 40,000 shekels with him and
Really?
other weapons. Yes. It looks like he was still looking for a way to get out of Gaza into Egypt to break free.
Now we're talking about
You're talking about Sinwar.
Sinwar.
That's right. So very, very fascinating. But my point, though, in all of this is that what we have here is a situation, as we've mentioned a moment ago, where now how does Israel navigate this?
Right.
And, Netanyahu's had one victory after the next. You have Haniyeh, who died on July 31st.
Right.
You have Mohammed Deif. You have
Nasrallah,
Nasrallah just a few weeks ago.
That's right.
I mean, we are seeing the head of these terrorist organizations being decapitated,
Right.
one after the next. And Iran has to be looking at this
With great concern.
absolutely.
They are back on their heels. The dynamics of this whole circumstance has changed dramatically. And this, again, monumental, absolutely monumental in significance. Now, looking at the South, this seems to suggest, we need to wait and see, seems to suggest that Israel will, in fact, do what they intended to do, which is topple Hamas, bring in a security layer over Gaza. They are pushing Hezbollah back in the north. And victory after victory. And I'd like to speak to that a little bit also in this. They're putting Iran back on their heels. West Bank is being addressed. What is the overall effect of it? Now, our hope, of course, is that somehow a settled peace could reside over the land. We have things we're concerned about. You brought up Russia, and they're seeming to be more and more involved. Russian advanced weaponry being discovered in the hands of Hezbollah, for example. Clearly, Russia is inserting themselves more and more. We're concerned. But as Israel is making way and bringing now these victories, one after the other, I think, firstly, Israel in the eyes of the world has changed. They looked very weak a year ago. Now it's completely changed. They're going to bring a security layer over Hamas. They're going to push back Hezbollah in the north and then bring a buffer there. They're going to bring more of a heavy hand in West Bank, Judea and Samaria. Iran's going to be on their heels. Could there be some, we know it's temporary because we know that Ezekiel 38 and 39 will be fulfilled, but could there be a time of peace?
And that's what
we hope for.
And Netanyahu gave an address to Israel, and
Yes.
it was also later recorded in English. And after he declaring that Sinwar is dead, he said, quote, "This is not the end of the war in Gaza.
That's
it's the
right.
beginning to the end." And then he spoke to the people of Gaza, and listen to this. He goes, quote, "I have a simple message. This war can end tomorrow.
Right.
It can end if Hamas lays down its arms and returns our hostages." And then he goes on to say Hamas is holding 101 hostages in Gaza who are citizens of 23 countries, citizens of Israel, but citizens of many other countries. Israel is committed to doing everything in our power to bring them all home. Israel will guarantee, get this, the safety of all those who return our hostages. But to those who would harm our hostages, I have another message. Israel will hunt you down and bring you to justice. And then look at this, going on to what you're talking about, this message of hope.
Right.
He says, I have a message of hope to the peoples of the region. Quote, "The axis of terror that was built by Iran is collapsing before our eyes. Nasrallah is gone. His deputy, Moshe, is gone. Haniyeh is gone. Deif is gone. Sinwar is gone. The reign of terror that the Iranian regime has imposed on its own people and on the peoples of Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, and Yemen, this too will come to an end." Here it is. He's laying out this vision of hope. It
That's
doesn't
right.
have to be this way.
That's right.
But what I say that I so commend Netanyahu for is that he's persevered because there have been call after call for ceasefire.
That's right.
And if there was a ceasefire, it would have been more of the same.
That's right.
The fact that he persevered,
That's right.
even though there were threats for him to be boycotted, that munitions would be withheld, even just the other day.
Yep.
The news was that Israel had 30 days to get their act together in Gaza, or even the United States would pull munitions as well. He persevered.
That's right.
A model of leadership, I believe, in the midst of great tragedy. And could it be through that leadership we are going to see, as you mentioned a moment ago, for a season, however long that season will be, a different Middle East?
Because the message is Israel wants peace. Israel wants peace with her neighbors. You know, we've heard over and over and over this word genocide being thrown out as an accusation against Israel. If they wanted to commit genocide, they would have done it way before October 7. If they wanted to commit genocide, they could have done it for the last 75 years. Their intent and purpose was to topple Hamas, who buried themselves inside the population of Gaza. And the numbers we're hearing, of course, that make up that genocide accusation, many of them are militants themselves.
Exactly. We're talking about 43,000 people, but
many of them are militants.
Absolutely.
Now, have there been innocents? No question. Absolutely there have. But that's blood on the hands of Hamas. They buried themselves in.
And it was Sinwar who said they're necessary sacrifices.
Exactly.
And that was going back to what I was going to say earlier. That was what he was using to control the narrative. He knew he would have, or the media would have his back.
Right.
Other governments would have his back. There was such a groundswell against Israel immediately after October 7th.
That's right.
And everything was pivoting against. They were winning the narrative.
That's
and
right.
And I think for Sinwar, he thought time was on his side.
Exactly right, because he believed that the pressure of the nations would come against Israel. All of these protests that we've seen in campuses around the world, all of these would pressure the governments to pressure Israel. And Israel has withstood it and said, no, we have a mission. We have got to bring some semblance of security here. Hamas has to go. And has there been tragedy upon tragedy? Yes. I'm saying it's on the blood is on the hands of Sinwar and the leadership of Hamas.
I couldn't agree more. As Netanyahu said in this speech and previously, this war could end.
Exactly.
All you need to do is lay down your arms,
Return the hostages.
And we're good.
Well, what about genocide?
Exactly right.
No, they're saying lay down your arms.
And yet the International Criminal Court still is looking into those allegations.
Right.
They also the International Court of Justice wants to bring arrest warrants for Netanyahu and other leaders.
Yeah.
Again, there's this false equivalency that's
Exactly.
taking place here.
So, Sinwar, Hamas in the south. But that's part of the bigger mission, bringing security to the land, pushing Hezbollah back. Now, I want to mention, there was a call where Israel essentially insisted that the UN, quote, peacekeepers be removed from the area. And there was a lot of criticism. Mm-hmm. Israel took over that. And I believe that their response could have been, what was the point of having the UN peacekeepers there to begin with if they weren't going to bring any kind of semblance of peace? These Hezbollah militant fighters have been building terror tunnels in the north now, we're discovering. Hundreds of them. Right before the eyes of the UN peacekeepers. They're bringing in weapons by the multiple thousands right under the eyes of the UN peacekeepers. What is the point of having them there if they're not going to do anything? They're complicit in what they're seeing, this buildup. What's the point?
And I'm so glad you mentioned that Israel has given warning after warning,
right,
because you saw that with Gaza as well. I mean, they would send text messages, make phone calls, get out of this area because there's going to be a strike. Never in history, in the history of urban warfare, have you ever seen a country go to the lengths that Israel has gone to ensure the safety of the civilians so that only the militants, the terrorists, are executed or eliminated.
Now, would they do that if genocide was the intent? No.
Absolutely not.
No, they took every precaution possible.
But Hamas and Hezbollah would. I mean, that's the river to the sea. Palestine must be free.
You know that they would, in fact, decimate the population.
Exactly right. So getting back to this whole idea of a ceasefire, the ceasefire is the common thing that we've seen historically.
Right.
There'll be a skirmish, there'll be a battle. Okay, now everyone settle down. And what happens? Israel's enemies rebuild so that they can attack again.
Right.
And what Israel's doing now is going to and after Hezbollah and Hamas to such a degree that they can't come back again.
Exactly. And let's go back in time a little bit. When you ask what led up to October 7, many will say, well, they were under siege. Israel basically had them under siege. Well, what do you expect? My answer to that is, well, why did Israel have them, quote, under siege? And by the way, they weren't fully under siege of Israel. Egypt controlled that border. Let's not forget that. But why did Israel try to control the borders of Gaza? Because they're bringing in weapons on purpose to destroy Israel, and they're bringing in billions of dollars. And how are they using those billions of dollars? To build terror tunnels, to construct a plan for the destruction of Israel. Of course, Israel is going to protect themselves and try to bring this to an end and stop this influx of warfare, essentially, to their borders. What do you expect them to do? What would we do if
exactly right.
If the United States heard that, let's say Mexico had decided that they're going to be the enemy and they're going to eliminate the United States, and they're going to be putting nuclear bombs on the border? Well, what do you think we would do? No, we're not going to have that. Just like we wouldn't allow the Soviet Union to put missiles in Cuba.
Exactly right.
No, we're not going to allow that. Same idea. And yet Israel gets,
it's always a double standard.
Exactly.
A double standard. At the UN, it's a double standard.
Exactly.
I mean, the UN spreads anti-Semitism like the Wuhan lab spread COVID-19. Let's be honest.
Came out of left field.
Yeah, but don't you see that?
Yeah.
They spread it, anti-Semitism like no other organization.
No question.
Double standard. And Hamas, the Palestinian Authority, Hezbollah, Iran, they all know that.
Exactly.
They all know that. And that takes us to, well, then, what's the deeper root here? Why is there such antagonism towards Israel and the Jews? Mm-hmm. And I think there you have to see, biblically speaking, all forms of anti-Semitism have their root in Satan himself.
Well, and you can go back biblically, of course, in the history of those peoples and see that this animosity and division goes all the way back to the sons of Abraham. There's been history upon history that have led up to this moment. But the question now is, what does Israel do? Now, they control the Philadelphia corridor, that corridor between Egypt and Gaza. The wisest course is for them to never relent, never let that go, and to bring that security layer over Gaza and help them to rebuild it. Frankly, they need to rebuild it. And they need to raise up schools that are going to teach basic education rather than hatred.
And then you can go back to pre-October 7th in the sense that Israel and Saudi Arabia were looking at normalization talks. They were looking at building a corridor through those countries that would have access to the Mediterranean, bypass Iran and what they're doing, in the Persian Gulf. And all of a sudden now we open up a whole new prosperous swatch of land that will be mutually beneficial for Israel and her neighbors.
Gaza could be a paradise right now.
Absolutely.
The amount of money
the Mediterranean resort there.
Place where people could visit and visit the shores of the Mediterranean and have hotels, and what a waste.
Yeah. Well, clearly this story's not done yet. There's a lot we're going to see. Israel and hasn't responded to the latest attack from Iran with 180 ballistic missiles. And so there's a lot of question in regards to what's going to happen on that front as well.
That's huge.
So for us, we're going to be keeping you informed, staying abreast of all that's taking place, because we want you to know with biblical commentary what is happening with Israel in the Middle East, and specifically how we're witnessing the setting of the stage for the events of Ezekiel 38 and 39. I pray for the peace of Israel, as I know you do.
Absolutely.
Pray for the peace of the Jews. I, by the way, just for the record, do not delight, nor does God, in the death of anyone.
That's right.
He wants all to repent and come to saving faith in Jesus Christ.
That's right.
But he gives everyone a gift. It's called free will, and they get to make that choice. And he will respect the choice that they make, even though he tries to woo them and draw them to saving faith in his Son, Jesus Christ.
Amen.
So,
biblical response.
Biblical response.
Take no pleasure in the destruction of the wicked.
Absolutely.
Ezekiel.
These are somber days. These are days where we have to be alert. We need to be prayerful.
Yes.
God is on the move, though.
Absolutely. And we have to keep our eyes on what happens next in Iran. This is very
Iran, Turkey, Russia, China.
But the next move
is going to be a significant one.
Yes.
Just today, Iran issued another threat. If you strike our military bases, there will be a significant attack against you.
And have they been able to mount any significant attack? No. But we have to be careful.
We do. I mean, Hezbollah also said we're entering into a new phase. We're going to use better technology to attack Israel. So there's a lot for us to keep our eyes on at this time.
That's code. That's code for, we just got some high-tech stuff from Russia.
Exactly right. No, you're exactly right.
I just bring it up. Yeah. That's code.
We didn't know where it was at, but we thank you for finding it for us.
We didn't have it before, but they shut it. They just brought it in.
By the way, think about this for a moment. Here I'm about to end it, but there's one more thing.
I know.
But you know, there have been these threats from these other nations, including the United States, that they will boycott and limit the munitions that go to Israel.
Right.
But when you look at the treasure trove that Israel has found in Lebanon,
it's massive. It's absolutely
massive what they're discovering.
Right.
How much do they really need from the other nations?
But let's also remember,
they can reformat the whole thing.
Well, that's true, but let's remember that they're not sophisticated weapons either. They're very basic.
Some of them are sophisticated from Russia.
But the new stuff, they just got that in, which came from Iran.
Exactly right.
Okay,
exactly.
Sorry. I got off
there.
Though. It's true. It's crazy. We need to keep our eyes on what's going on. This is not done.
Not for a moment.
So that's what we're going to do. We're going to keep those who watch this podcast informed. We're going to stay on top of what's happening. We're going to bring commentary from the biblical perspective.
Absolutely.
This thing is critical right now. We are watching history and prophecy unfold.
Absolutely. And that's why we want you to come and visit our website at www.blessors.org. That's blessors with an ors.org. We want you to understand our vision and mission as a ministry. We also want you to go to our newsroom. There you'll see our articles, featured articles with biblical commentary. We also curate news from a variety of sources so that you will have the latest information regarding Israel and the Middle East. So make sure you check out our website at www.blessors.org. We also encourage you to follow us on Facebook, X, and formerly Twitter, and Getter. We also encourage you to like this podcast and subscribe to our channel as well. And by the way, we encourage your partnership and your prayers, financially and your prayers as well, as we build and strengthen this new vital ministry. Again, the words that God said to Abraham, I will bless those who bless you, and I will curse those who curse you. Genesis 12:3. That was a covenant promise, a unilateral promise that God made to Abraham, and we are literally watching the unfolding of that promise day after day after day.
Amen.
Bless Israel. Those who bless Israel will be blessed. Shalom, shalom.